everyone. Good evening. When I found out that John was going to be doing a presentation, I jumped at the chance to introduce him with a few words. In fact, it's my great honor to do so. John, as so many of you know, is a wonderful composer of many, many works of all kinds, from solo works to wonderful, magnificent operas. He is the only composer I know who has won a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Pulitzer Prize, probably many more, but those are three biggies. And he's also very humble, and he's a dear, dear friend and a devoted teacher. He's taught for many years at Juilliard, and I'm so lucky to have him as a friend and colleague there. So without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce John Corigliano.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Derek. I see you. Hi, Mason. Don't forget about Mason.
Yes, thank you. Well, you just heard from Melinda Wagner, who is an ACO board member, and I'm Derek Bermel, Artistic Director of the American Composers Orchestra. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for today's talk, discovery. Who knows what we'll discover about these two great composers who are with me today, John Corigliano and Mason Bates. And just to let you know a little bit about the event, this Composer to Composer series is an intergenerational conversation between American composers. And the idea is that we learn about them through conversation about a work of each of theirs and about, talk about whatever they want to talk about, leading a creative life, New York nightlife, San Francisco nightlife, I don't know. But from John Corigliano, we're going to delve into the Circus Maximus and Mason Bates's work, Anthology of Fantastic Zoology. These are two composers who have, huge catalogs of works and have been performed by many orchestras all over the world. But they both also have an association with the American Composers Orchestra. And I think, John, if I'm going to go back here to the 20th century for both of you. Do you remember the 20th century?
Oh.
Remember that?
A little bit.
So I think, John, I believe that your oboe concerto was premiered by the American Composers Orchestra back in the 70s. And Mason, am I correct to say that Songs for His Animation?
Yeah, we did that, and we did a piece called Omnivorous Furniture.
Omnivorous Furniture, yes. Okay, I remember.
Early electronic piece.
Yes. With you playing synthesizer, or?
Right. The Sounds for His Animation was a synthesizer concerto, and Omnivorous Furniture has electronic sounds, so I was performing those.
So are we talking about the 90s?
We're talking about the late 90s, early 2000s.
Early aughts, whatever those are called. Well, you're both very well preserved, I must say. You're doing better than I. But anyway, today the idea is really for me to be more like the bass player in Spinal Tap, like the lukewarm water. So I'm just here to kind of facilitate and welcome you both. And thank you so much for participating in this talk.
Sure. Long time ago, Mason was my student at Juilliard, and we worked together, and I knew he was going to really do amazing things. And it's been such a joy for me to watch him grow and grow and grow, so that now he's a really major force in music. So I get very proud when I listen to anything Mason does.
Well, thanks, John. What's kind of amusing is that when I was studying with you, and then in the many years since, where I still feel like I'm like groveling to you with needs and calling you on the phone with compositional problems, I hear you often saying that the piece that you're working on is not going to happen. You're going to cancel it. You're not going to finish. And Circus Maximus was one of those pieces, like in the kind of early 2000s. I remember you telling me that you just weren't able to figure this thing out. It was disaster. You're going to have to call Jerry Junkin and withdraw the commission. And anybody that studied with you knows this, but also anybody that knows you, has heard this kind of grappling with a new work. And so it's pretty cool to be able to talk to you about this piece, Circus Maximus, which has really become a kind of masterpiece in the genre, especially having heard you kind of diss it as you were working on it.
Well, yeah, it's true. Composing is really hard, and when I start something, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't get ideas. I can't use my technique to get ideas. They just have to finally evolve. And so in that time, I feel completely helpless. And, I can't make it happen. I can try and think about it. But until something happens, I don't have any craft either. The craft comes with the idea. So it's scary. I think beginning pieces are scary. The ends of pieces are great because you know what's happening and you know what to do. But the whole beginning through half, I would say, or 3/4 is really hard. And that's what it was with Circus Maximus. Well, for one thing, I'd never written really for band before. I'd orchestrated a 4-hand piece called Gazebo Dances for Band, very traditional thing, and many years ago. I had never really written for band. And Jerry Junkin, who is the most important and wonderful conductor of band music, I think, any place, wanted me to write a big piece. And I was really stymied. First of all, I didn't know that the bands could really play as well as they do. So he had my scherzo from the second movement of the first symphony arranged for band. He invited me down, and the band played it for me, and it was terrific. So I couldn't say they couldn't do anything. They could do anything. Also, I had a lot of instruments that I never dealt with before, and all these transpositions, which I loathe. So I said, Jerry, if I can write it in C, I'll do it. So that was the deal. And that's what I did. And then I had to think about what I was going to do. And the thing is, I like to plan a piece first and get the material for it later, because I think the planning of it is the big decisions. I mean, years ago we had these great forms, sonata allegro, rondos, variations, etc. But today composers don't use those things, and so the idea of just starting composing and continuing composing until you're finished doesn't make much sense to me. I have to know why I'm composing and what I'm composing. Also, because I'm pretty eclectic. I mean, I use 12-tone methods when necessary, tonal methods when necessary, aleatoric things when necessary. How do I begin a piece then with no restrictions at all on me? So in this case, I said to myself, well, the thing that makes a band different than an orchestra is that bands really rehearse. I mean, orchestras see a thing Tuesday and play it Thursday. They don't have no time to do anything like ambient sounds all over the theater, because that has to be rehearsed. And so the best I could do, for example, in my clarinet concerto of 1977, was to have 5 French horns around the first boxes, and then 2 trumpets, I think, above that, and 2 clarinets on the very left and right of the back of the hall, the back of the audience. And that was because they only came in the last 4 minutes of the last movement. So the rehearsal time was very limited. But here I had a band. I had kind of all these players that could rehearse and really do it. So I said, why can't I write a total surround piece? A piece that is built about the idea of surround, that really puts the audience almost in the center and the instruments all around them. So I started thinking about that, and that I would be able to do that because they would rehearse it. And then I thought, what does that come to mind? And I thought, this grand circus. And then the word Circus Maximus came to my mind. And being a real buff of Roman history, I know a lot about the Circus Maximus. The Circus Maximus was a huge, much more than 1 football field arena, outdoor arena, huge oval shape, in which 300,000 people a day went to the Circus Maximus to see combat, to see chariot races, just competitions and entertainment. So I thought, wow, that's exciting. And for me, it had a special excitement because I was thinking about us in our time and the kind of Circus Maximus we're living in this world where, I'm speaking from upstate New York, Mason is in California, Derek's in Brooklyn, and we're everything can take place. We can access anything. Entertainment is limitless. We can see tons and tons of things all the time, and we do. That's how we entertain ourselves. So I thought, well, what about Circus Maximus' history? And the interesting thing is that it was around for 1,000 years, from the beginning of Rome to the fall, which meant that it lasted more than any other thing. The Colosseum is nothing compared to the Circus Maximus. And at the very end, when Rome was falling and the rulers of Rome wanted to make sure that the people of Rome were not terrified, they put on more and more shows at the Circus Maximus. I said, that sounds familiar to me. That sounds like what's happening now. We are being entertained to death. We are having entertainment all around us all the time, and yet we know the terror of what one suitcase bomb could do, of what a viral thing, which we now have, can do, of what various exotic things that are terrifying can happen so easily because our technology is so good. But this technology gave us this. It gave us our iPhones. It gave us the computers. It gave us everything, 500 channels of television. So I thought, what about writing a piece, a surround piece, in which I depict the glory and then the terror of knowing that you're in this Circus Maximus? And that's really what happened. That's how I started. And that gave me the idea to get restrictions. Right away, I thought, okay, I can plan this out in such a way that by the end of this piece, people will know it's frightening. In fact, this piece ends with a shotgun blast and the lights out in the hall immediately. So that was the beginning. And then, should I keep talking? I sound like I'm talking myself to death. Is this boring or?
You know, the problem is you've got all these people commenting and saying how much they love you at the same time, you and Mason. So it's kind of it's a love fest here in the comments.
I want to get
lots of composers calling in and things, but maybe we should hear some music.
Before you get music, let me just outline what you're going to hear, because the whole point was I'm planning out 34 minutes or 35 minutes of music. So instead of starting at the beginning, I started with titles of movements that will be interlocked. And I thought the titles could be either in Latin or in English, but the Latin had to be something that we all understood. So the first, I put them down. I didn't draw any graphs to do anything yet. I just put down Interludes. That's going to be the introduction. That's going to be wild and wonderful and lots of surround sound things happening. And that's going to lead to a second movement. And I said, now I want something the opposite of that, soft and intimate. So I decided to write a piece called Screen/Siren, which means that the screen means the tempting sirens of today who are tempting us to buy products and to wear this and wear that and do this and do that. Those are the temptresses and tempters of today. And of course, the sirens in ancient Greece were the people who lured the sailors to their deaths in the Odyssey. The next movement I call channel surfing. And that takes place all over the theater. Different movies, different TV things, all happening until it builds to a huge peak and the introitus comes back down. And then I said, now let's get away from all of this. So let's have a movement away from the city, away from all of this world activity. So I wrote what's called night music. But I called it night music 1 because I said, this is the night music of the prairie, of people away from these million of entertainment things. It'll have wolves howling, etc., which I can do in the band. You know, it will be a different kind of atmosphere. And then after that, night music 2, which is the city's night music, which is alive with jazz and fights and whistles and sirens, leading to Circus Maximus, where all the themes are combined, which goes down to a prayer, which is, can we get out of this? And finally, veritas, which means the truth. And that is when the original introitus music comes back and builds and builds and builds until the shotgun. Now, I have a graph of this, and maybe I should just illustrate, before we play examples, a little bit of where the players are, number 1, and then where the graph is, and then play a few examples. So the first thing, could we do the graph of the concert hall? This is something I drew when I was at a concert, and I wanted to, We have to see the whole thing there. Can we spread that to see the bottom of it too? Anyway, this is something I wrote for myself to clarify where people would be and, you know, how they would be. And you can see there's the stage, there are the audience members, and then there are rings, which are boxes, go higher and higher. And then I had to think where I wanted these players to be. So this entire ring around are 11 trumpets in the first boxes playing out to the audience. And then there are a saxophone quartet, which is separated from the band, up in the second boxes with a double bass, because for some reason bands have one double bass. So I said it'd be much better used with the sax quartet. Then I put 2 French horns on the other side to help with the wolf howls and things, a clarinet on the top of the theater, and right in the back of the audience, I put a marching band, which had flute, clarinet, a piccolo and clarinet, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, and a bass drum. That was the beginning there, right down there. You can see that. It's hard to read, but again, this was really something I wrote to clarify it for me. So now that I had these movements, I started my piece beginning with the introitus because I knew what was going to go after that. Can we get the graph of the whole piece?
This is a little intimidating, just for those of you at home.
No, I'm sorry. It's just this
no, the graph. That was
but it's not a graph, you know, in the sense of the word of mathematics. It's not that kind of graph. It's just that is the whole 34-minute piece, and the reason that you can know that is because at the bottom you see the little notches. Those are 1-inch notches that give you about a 1-inch, a 1 minute time. And the reason I do this is so I don't get lost in spending all my time, I say on a slow movement and very little on a fast movement, but I actually see proportions. So when you look at this graph, it starts out right away and it says introitus and it starts very high. And then you can see it drops down low for the screen Sirens. And then you can see it starts jaggling up and down for the channel surfing. And then it reaches the same height it was before with the introitus music coming back. And then it falls down into the night music 1. And I have little things like wolf calls and all written down there. And then night music 2 is the jagged line running up. And then Circus Maximus is all this music coming back, building to the biggest peak of all. And then we fall down slowly. I changed that in this graph, not so fast. And we have the prayer, which builds, and the final veritas, which is off the page, which is growing up again to the peak. That was the next step for me. After I had the movements and the orders of tension and release and return of things and new material, now I can begin to compose. So that's how I started. And now I guess we can listen to the introduction or introitus. This is Jerry Junkin doing a performance with the University of Texas Band in Austin. Really amazing bunch of kids. They are, I mean, fabulous players, and they knew the piece backwards, which is something a composer really wants. So I'm very grateful to them. Sounds like a lot of noise. It really sounds like a lot of noise. But you know, when you're in the hall and these 11 trumpets are around you, all around you playing those fanfares, it's really an experience. Even on 2-channel stereo, it's not so great. Actually, Knox released it on 5-channel, you know, surround sound, but you have to have a player to do that. So the real thing is you have to go in the theater to hear this, which is something I like to do a lot, right that way.
Hey, John, when this came out, I mean, I know there had been, you know, a lot of wonderful music written for band, but I feel like this was a big, highly visible step by a major American composer writing, you know, like a numbered symphony for a medium that, yes, it absolutely had a lot of fine works contributed, but you were kind of crossing over from the symphonic world, and it seems like in just hearing that, you're really celebrating all the things a band can do that an orchestra cannot. You know, all those trumpets, all that percussion. It's a pretty exuberant beginning.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things bands can do that orchestras can't. It mainly has to do with time. It takes us a long time, as all of you composers know, to write something down. And then you're given 2 or 3 rehearsals and it's sight read basically at the first performance. But they don't do that. And a lot of people only compose for band that are very good composers. Some students of mine who have gone into band composing because they get really fine performances and good commissions, I might add, because the bands exist on our repertoire, modern repertoire. They have very few pieces of the past. And so, Mason, you've written for band, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely, for Jerry Junkin.
Yeah.
You know, I started out maybe as you did, a little bit tentatively, and you know, transcribing pieces from symphonic, you know, symphonic pieces into band. But I really fell in love with it and wrote several pieces, and still have you know, a couple of commissions coming up for bands.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to get a band commission. And when you go to the first rehearsal, they already know the piece and are working on fine tuning instead of what page they're supposed to be on. Yeah, you would be. I mean, Mason is a fantastic, as you all know, master of the orchestra. I mean, super master. I always said, I think that after Ravel, the next high thing is Mason, and I mean that sincerely. And when you hear some of his music, you'll appreciate that. He really totally understands the orchestra in a way that even I really don't, as much as he does. I mean, God, it's frightening. Not a note too much, not a note too little, and absolutely perfect. So, I mean, you really understand big masses of instruments. I mean, you have that ability. And I know the band world would want a big major work from you. I know they would.
I mean, it is. I mean, for all the reasons you mentioned, it's a phenomenally inspiring place to work. I love, you know, just seeing your you know, diagram of the hall. Just right there, you can see some of the things you can do when you have that many players and you aren't limited by, you know, some of the strictures that we have in the symphonic world. But anyway, so we've just heard the introit. So the next one is Sirens, right? That's one of my favorite. I want to hear what you do with that.
Okay. Well, that reaches a peak. It dips down a bit, the introit, then gets to a peak again, and then suddenly cuts off. And you'll be hearing from one side of the hall on the second boxes this group of 4 saxes and a bass. And it's seductive music. It's music that seduces you. And I can't play the whole thing for you because it's a little too long. But what it ends up doing is it seduces all the other players that are around the hall. So you'll hear a trumpet join in with it, then you'll hear a clarinet from the top of the hall in the back, and then you'll hear a piccolo from the marching band, and they will all join in it and sing this siren song until they're interrupted by channel surfing. So this is just a little bit about how the screen sirens sound.
That's so cool.
And right about that time, they'll play that theme, and the clarinet on the top of the hole will start playing it, and others will play it. And they all play together, and it's very seductive. And suddenly, with a crash, we get into channel surfing. This is what we do because we have so many alternatives and we get bored all the time. We do a minute of this, a half minute of this. We switch channels. We switch everything to everything. And so what I try to do is get different groups of players all around the audience, including on the stage, to play different kinds of music. It kind of starts with the Bugs Bunny kind of chase scene, which is just silly cartoon music, and then suddenly it gets very seductive, and then suddenly it gets horn calls from a movie with about hunting and hunting horns, and then it goes to the sirens now playing very fast siren music that sounds like actual sirens outdoors, and then it goes to something else and something else, and each one is interrupted by the other one, and they get closer together and closer together in the interruptions until finally they build this superheated energy over a chord that is being growing in the band, leading to a climax of that. So you're not going to hear all that, but just a little bit of channel surfing, so you can hear things going around. And I think we're going to get into, we're going to start with the screen siren, ending the screen siren, and then do a little bit of channel surfing, so you can hear the transition is very immediate. Now, each one of those things is in a different part in the hall. So we're listening to it, and I think you can get the idea, though. It's a lot of fun because the players interrupt the players, and it's worrying about the audience. And the march that you hear, the kind of circus march, is played in the back of the hall. And in the climax of the piece, Circus Maximus, they actually start walking down the aisles and marching around the audience playing. We can't play that for you because you really need to be there. But they will take a bigger and bigger part in this as the piece progresses. So that's kind of channel surfing.
Hey, John, there are a lot of questions coming in from our viewers and high viewers, because they're coming in from all over the place. A lot of folks that you know from all over the country, maybe all over the world, not even sure. But one of the questions that came up was about how you think about harmony and scale content, and how you approach that, and texture, color, things like that. And one of the viewers noticed that there's an effect at the opening of the Sirens movement where the instruments kind of sound like vocalists, and there's definitely, a hint of jazz. And someone mentioned Duke Ellington. What is your feeling about how do you deal with those elements like harmony and scales, melody?
Well, I guess I deal with it differently in different times. I mean, the thing about it is part of this piece is about very different kinds of worlds interrupting each other and getting wilder and wilder. So, of course, the harmonic worlds are very different from one to the other. The scales are very different. And because this eclecticism is in the service of a big form, I think it hangs together. I kind of not crazy about just being eclectic, what I call kitchen sink eclecticism, where you're in the middle of playing something and then you throw in a tone cluster and then you do this for no reason, because I think that gets a little frustrating. You want to know more about it. But I think this kind of eclecticism is about a big piece that needs those things at that time. And because it does, you can use the techniques of that. Because I personally think that original style is like your handwriting. It's something you're not aware of. When you sign your handwriting, you don't know that you wrote that way, but it's your signature. And if someone forges it, people can tell. And I think that a lot of decisions I make that are they're not conscious. I tend to gravitate towards the note key A at beginnings of endless pieces. I tend to have different kinds of spacings, different kinds of things that I do just because I do them. And then I use the techniques I want to use. I'm in control of those. I'm not in control of the language of my brain that is me. So they all mix. And I think if that happens, it's healthy. We live in an age in which tremendous differences of sounds and colors and things are available. And I like to make them available to me when they're necessary. I like to make up a situation in which they're necessary, which is Circus Maximus in this case. And then they make sense. This wouldn't make sense if I was just writing this as a symphony at all, but I wouldn't do that. I'd write a symphony as a symphony a different way. So all of that is what do you want this to be? What world do you need this to be in? You can utilize techniques. You can use, Baroque techniques, classical techniques, jazz techniques. You can use them. As long as there's a reason for them being used, it makes perfect sense. But you're still going to be you because of certain decisions that you just don't know about. This was pointed out to me by Leonardo Ballata, a wonderful composer, who just called me up and came over to my house one day. And I said, I don't believe in all that style business because people are so concerned about it. And he said, well, but you do actually have this. And he took two pieces of mine, which I got out of my closet where I store music. One is Fantasia on an Ostomato, which is based on Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, the motive, bum, 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 that motive and the harmony and the rhythm of that. And the other was Etude Fantasy, and the first etude is for the left hand only, and therefore things that fit the left hand. And he showed me a passage in the Etude Fantasy in which I had picked exactly the same notes based on the hand, and in the Fantasia on Ostomato, where I used exactly the same notes based on the major-minor relationship of Beethoven. And I didn't know that. I had no idea. But he said, that's it, you see. You don't know that, but it's you. You can control techniques. You can't control the other, and you shouldn't. You just go with it.
John, do you jam out on the piano sometimes? You have a great piano, but I never really saw you just
I used to
inhabit that. But your music does obviously sound, very idiomatic for the instruments that you write for, and I feel like there must be some secret piano jamming going on.
Well, when I was a kid, I used to do that. I used to improvise all the time in many different worlds, in my own world, whatever. And I used to do it for some years. And in fact, Ursula Oppens commissioned a piece for me. And I said, look, what I want to do is I want to do improvisations and catch them on a MIDI. And then I want that notated, but I want that to be the piece. and I chose 3 improvisations, and they have the dates like June 7th, 2006 or whatever on them that I actually improvised them. And then we had it taken down, which was a really big job because I don't have click tracks, obviously, and things are changing all the time. We got that down into music, and it's published. It's called Winging It, and it's improvisations, 3 improvisations that I did. So I have done that. I've not done much of it lately, and I really want to get back to it, Mason. I think it's very liberating to do that. And
especially when you get your parameters set, you know, like once you know the kind of material you're trying to create, you know, I imagine then letting yourself go to the piano and kind of having, you know, some kind of framework to improvise in could be useful.
That's right. The thing interesting about these are that I didn't give myself any parameters. I simply sat down and started my hands moving, and then from that, continued it. I don't know why. It just seemed to me that would be a real improvisation. I didn't work out my head. I didn't do anything like that. It just had to happen. And most of them were absolutely horrible. I mean, really, 99% of them were thrown out and horrible. I'm just saved 3 that I thought were good. And it just been recorded, in fact, last week for a new record coming on Naxos. This wonderful pianist recorded it, winging it, and the other 2 piano pieces, Fantasia and Etude Fantasy. And my God, he could play the last etude, one that I was supposed to play. It's supposed to be a fast etude, but I can't play that fast. I'm not a real pianist. I never studied the piano. So I played this thing at my tempo, but I wanted it faster. And all of a sudden he played it and he said, "It feels like it should go faster." And I said, "I wish I could." And then he said, "Well, look." And he started playing it. And it was so great. It was like me on steroids. I mean, I just loved it. So yeah, I love it. Yeah, I would love to do more.
All right, so we have this the channel surfing. So what comes next?
What comes next is the very quiet section in which I tried to use sonority. I mean, you calling about sonority and color. I use sonority as theme to create a night music. Clusters slowly moving into starbursts of various like crotales and other instruments that actually were all around the hall, in addition to being on the stage. And a theme that becomes the main theme of the prayer, which is the 7th movement near the end of the piece. It's just heard a little bit, and then it's heard a little bit again. And these wolf howls. I got a French French horn player to come over, and I said, "Can you make me a wolf howl?" And it didn't work at first, but then they really worked on half valving and getting it to work and not to hit all the overtones coming down. And we got some really beautiful wolf howls, and you will hear those. And the students, again, that's not something that you can ask an orchestra to do in 2 days because you got to work on that a bit. But students who are going to a university and practice and have time to do this, they made some really beautiful howls, as you will hear. So I'm going to actually play the whole night music one, which is 4 minutes and 52 seconds, if you bear with me, because it's all about these sounds that come from nature. Right. Yeah, and that low A pedal is actually a percussionist with soft sticks rolling on the low A string of the piano with the pedal down to get that continuous pedal. Because it's really hard to get continuous sounds on a wind group. But I wanted a low pedal, and I thought that would be a nice way to get it. And it makes a beautiful, sustained low A.
How many different horn players are doing those wolf calls? Is it like something only one can do? Or?
No. There were two on stage and two in the back of the hall in the second boxes, I think. And they played back and forth to each other. So the calls were going back and forth at the same time. Yeah.
So technicolor. I mean, you really feel like you're just in a complete different world when you hear that.
Yeah. Well, that was what I was hoping, and that feeling was one kind of night music, the one kind I really love. But then I said, there's another night music, and night music 2 is completely different. It's, as I said, night music of the city, and you'll hear all sorts of stuff. Doors being slammed, jazz being played in one place, something being interrupted by a police whistle, a siren, and the whole thing ends with this incredible build-up and two sirens playing, like David Del Tredici, playing wildly loud, and orchestra cuts out and the sirens are playing. And when they start coming down, the next movement begins, which is Circus Maximus, which is everybody plays all the things that they played up till now, climaxed by the idea that the band playing that strange little march actually starts marching down the aisle and marches around the audience. And the trumpet players that are around the audience start a figure on the first trumpet, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, to 11, and then back. So they're revolving in a circle of sound, and the main band is building this climax. So we could hear a little bit of Night Music 2, and we can just hear that to get the idea of it. But I'll describe Circus Maximus because you really can't hear it very well without being there. So this is Night Music 2, the Night Music of the City. And then it really gets going. Then it builds and builds and builds to the sirens, and it's all over the place, round and in front. And Circus Maximus begins with those horn calls from channel surfing, other music from channel surfing, the introitus music, the Night Music 2, all combined together. As I said, in this revolving series of fanfares played around the hall, the marching band. And what happens is it builds and builds until total climax. Let me see. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to play that for you. What happens at a certain point when the marching band is just getting out the exit door, the conductor cues and the band plays with all the percussionists playing 16th notes as fast as possible, the whole band playing the biggest chord they can, stagger breathing. And this is where I changed from my map. People say, do you ever change anything? Well, I did change one thing. When I showed you the original one, maybe we should put that up for a second. You could just see what I thought was wrong and what I changed. The map of the whole thing. Yeah, you see, see we're at the very top, way down, like 4/5 of the way, where it reaches the peak, and then it comes down, and there's the prayer movement. Now, notice that coming down is pretty much like the coming down earlier to the Night Music 1. That is, it's rather rapid. And I thought, no, it's got to stay up, and it has to take like 2 minutes of staggered breathing and percussion is getting softer and softer to finally fade to where the prayer can begin. So I kind of changed the shape of that in my mind. I didn't do it on the graph because I knew what I was going to do, so I didn't have to. But I changed that and kind of left it in as this huge chord. It's kind of sensory overload. It's like so loud. And Carnegie, it was so loud, I was afraid the hall was going to go to pieces. And slowly it gets softer, softer with the same chord, holding the same chord, which, you know, you don't think a band does, but stagger breathing, they can. And it gets softer and softer until a single note remains. And that single note on the clarinet begins the prayer. Now, the melody that you heard in Night Music 1, a little bit, the flute started it, then the trumpet had it, and the orchestra had it, band had it. That comes back, and as a prayer, it's actually harmonized by overlapping plagal cadences, 4/1, 4/1, 4/1. That is, it's always that beautiful, gentle cadence from 4/1, which then becomes 4/1, which then becomes 4/1. So you actually go through all the keys. It goes through it, I think, 3 times. So it's not really in any key, but it sounds like it is, because the starts with the English horn playing, and then the clarinet and the flute and other instruments. They build this melody that seems to harmonize with it, even though the chords are constantly moving to another place all the time. And that continues. I can play a little bit of that, a couple of minutes, and then the original music from the introitus comes in, and we start to see the veritas is coming, the truth. So let's play a little bit of the prayer, and then the end. So that continues, as you see, just it's simple, it's very smooth. And what starts to happen is one chord starts taken by the brass on the stage, and the next chord starts taken by the surround brass, and then back and forth they build as the melody builds to this big climax, and then comes down and starts to play again. But this time, those little five short notes of the introitus get played, and it starts to build and build. And I don't know whether I have the whole thing here. It's not very long, so it probably is. And it builds. While this prayer is happening, you hear the kind of warlike sounds of the Circus Maximus, growing and growing and growing until finally it hits a high note held by all the trumpets on stage and off, and then down a half step and the gunshot goes off, a shotgun, which has proved to be very difficult in some places. We did it in Carnegie Hall. We tried to do it in Disney Hall, and they made us load half a shot, which didn't sound very good. Some places wanted a recording, but I really wanted a loud sound because it's very scary when you hear a shotgun live. A recording we're all used to from watching TV and good systems, but really live, it's terrifying. And the whole idea was this glamorous, gorgeous, opulent world that we're all enjoying so much is very scary. And at the very end, that shotgun means what is going to happen. And we all don't know that, obviously, but we certainly do know that the thing that we're hanging on to, the very entertainment we love and cherish, I wouldn't do without my iPhone for anything now, but its technology is also maybe going to destroy us. So that's how this piece ends. And I put it in the score that the second the shotgun goes off, the lights go out for 3 or 4 seconds and then come back up. Again, it's just theater, but it
That's
also
freaky as hell. That's
Yeah.
freaky as hell. That's up there with like yelling fire in a movie theater.
almost. But they don't have time to react because then the lights come on and everybody's happy. So anyway, this is the veritas that comes from the prayer. And that's it. So
Peace, John. I mean, that's really cool.
we're going to run over everybody. You know that. We're going to take another at least 30 minutes and talk about Mason now.
Hey, but no, just hearing that piece, you know, in excerpt form, imagine how cool that's going to be to hear that again when we're back in, you know, live music.
Yeah.
You know, the immersiveness of that is going to just be something that is just mind blowing after we've all spent, you know, almost a year doing Zooms and whatnot. It's interesting, you know, when you're writing for such big forces like this. You know, we're also focused on making that live experience really thrilling. You know, with this piece, it's completely surround. With my piece, Anthology of Fantastic Zoology, there's a lot of kind of on stage spatial effects. And the way that obviously most people hear music these days is online and Spotify. And it's an interesting tension because we want to create something that really is exciting for orchestras to play and is really a substantive experience. But a lot of the effects that we get from the hall are a little hard to translate. So even on this kind of stereo format, the piece sounds incredibly powerful. Be really cool to hear it, in a couple months when we can get back together.
Right. And now your fantastic zoology, your fantastic piece. I first heard the piece and recording, which the Chicago Symphony made, which is unbelievable. And I got a score and looked at it, and the details that Mason has put in, I mean, it's something to look at. It really is. It's something you really need to look at because it's an education to go through his scores minutely and see what he has really done. It's quite amazing. Tell us about it.
I'm just going to give the kind of drive-by shooting because we all have things to do and other Zooms to be part of, I guess. But this piece, I'll just frame it as coming out of the teachings that you grounded me in. Basically, I came to John kind of thinking with my fingers as a sort of pianist, and John, you really encouraged me to kind of take control of my musical narrative and find the material that would help tell the story of the piece. Anthology of Fantastic Zoology very much comes out of that teaching, even though it was written years after I studied with you. This is my second piece for the Chicago Symphony and Riccardo Muti, and having heard Maestro Muti conduct such vivid pieces, particularly dramatic pieces, having spent so many years conducting operas, Muti is just phenomenal at bringing dramatic works to life. I wanted to write something that came out of that sound world. And I especially was thinking about some of those Russian ballet scores that we all know and love, even things like, the Nutcracker, Tchaikovsky. I think what was attractive to me was that those Russian ballet scores has such memorable music. You just, those tunes, those textures are kind of like etched in your head. And I had come across this really cool compendium by this magical realist writer named Borges called Anthology of Fantastic Zoology years ago, like when I was studying with you, when I was working at Columbia in literature and you in composition at Juilliard. And I just didn't really have the ability to write a piece based on a collection of mythological creatures. So years later, I decided that would be a very vivid concept for a piece. And it's this kind of, like your piece, it's about 35 minutes, and it's in 11 increasingly longer movements, with movement titles like Sprite or The Griffin, animals that you might be familiar with. Also, some of the animals are kind of Borges's imagination, like the Abau Aku, which is an animal that is kind of like a palindrome, or the Zartan, which is an animal that is an island. And you can imagine coming up with like 6 or 7 creatures that you want to conjure with these themes that can be remembered, with the goal being to have them all come back at the kind of witching hour at the end of the piece. So I wanted to create these 6 or 7 different themes that could kind of carefully integrate later when they return. So I'll just give you a quick snapshot of a couple of them. The kind of interludes that occur between the different movements are, I need to plug my computer, I'm just realizing, these forest interludes. So we're going to open up with the first one. It's and then it goes into Sprite. So let's cue that up, Derek. Okay, well, thanks for playing that. Went on a little longer. I didn't mean to take up too much time, but you can hear that the these riffs that are coming from that initial flute, which is the kind of sprite, start getting passed around to the different members of the orchestra. And I thought it'd be fun to take some of these animals and kind of use their capriciousness or certain unique elements about them in as dramatic a way as possible. So I remember looking at the stage of the Chicago Symphony and seeing all these instruments, 75 feet apart from the far left to far right of the stage, and thinking there's a lot you can do spatially on the actual stage. And if you see the piece performed, like when it came to Carnegie with the Philadelphia Orchestra years ago, and basically you see all kinds of extreme choreography. You see the seventh stand of the second violin suddenly playing and passing off something from that stand all the way across the orchestra. And so that's the idea of taking the sprite and making its character not only something that is motivic and kind of riff, but also something that has a spatial component, like with John's piece. But in this case, it's more like just focused onto the stage. Christina, why don't we play just like the opening, kind of minute of the Abau Aku. This is the palindromic creature. You're not going to hear it go backwards, but you can get a kind of sense of this sort of ridiculous serpent-like creature.
I want to hear more. You're muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
I've
I want to
self-made.
hear more. It had to happen.
What about you? Yeah, no, Ricardo Muti and the Chicago Symphony have a phenomenal release of that piece. You can hear in that one, there are all kinds of like miniature palindromes where there'll be like a small phrase that goes backwards and forwards. But in fact, the entire 3-minute movement has this kind of point where the I think it's like a flexotone and a wind machine kind of bring a peak, and then everything after that it goes in reverse. And I found it to be really a fun challenge to create a piece of music that would really feel like it works forwards and backwards. And so the cymbals go backwards. All those little kind of crazy ratchet sounds kind of appear at the end. The giant tam-tam that kind of crashes at the beginning to announce it, that's kind of swelled in reverse and then choked at the end. So the Abau Aku is a real piece of whimsy from Borges, the writer of the compendium, and also for me when I was working it out. Here's a much quieter movement. As the kind of tasting menu goes on, things start to get a little bit longer, a little bit deeper. Here's Nymphs, which is 2 clarinets kind of tumbling across each other. We'll hear just maybe the first minute or minute and a half of this Christina. Yeah, that's John Ye and Stephen Williamson of the Chicago Symphony playing these little, like, kind of tumbling clarinet riffs, trying to conjure up some nymphs. And one of the things that's interesting about a form like this piece is that you get to create your own expectations. I think there's an expectation that, like with pictures at an exhibition, that, oh yeah, we have this little tasting menu. Each one is a little, self-contained piece. And in this case, I wanted the tasting menu to kind of get bigger and bigger and eventually kind of, gobble up the diner. So then we get to part of that dial of getting bigger movements is the Griffin. I'll just give you a handful of other examples. The Griffin, I think a lot of us know this if you've read Tolkien or C.S. Lewis. It's kind of a combination of an eagle and a lion that eats horses. So very noble, exciting creature. And this was my chance to create something that would really put the brass to good use. Additionally, though, I was kind of haunted by the suggestion from the timpanist at the Chicago Symphony to use this extended set of timpani built for the William Kraft Concerto. And I remember when Dave Herbert had told me that back when he played in San Francisco, I was thinking, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if I need to have 13 timpani involved. Well, that kind of stayed with me, and I thought, we could really do something exciting here if we have this extended set of timpani. And I was very careful to talk to Dave Herbert about what would be, normally acquirable timpani if a standard orchestra was playing it somewhere. And so you'll hear, after about a minute and a half, you'll hear a kind of gigantic timpani solo, which is very much a part of the Griffin. So here you go. there you have Dave Herbert and the amazing brass section of the Chicago Symphony. Admittedly, it's a little hard to hear everything in the space, and certainly on a recording when you're not like on laptop speakers. It's really incredible to hear that many timpani. We actually had to kind of work to reduce those down to a manageable number of 13. I'm going to play one more movement of this, and it's called Sirens. And so we've heard John's Sirens, which are incredibly seductive, and you can hear maybe how some of the teacher gets passed along to the student. In my Sirens, something similar dramatically happens, which is just a few players, in this case the string section, begin to kind of seduce the rest of the section. If you remember, we were talking about in the Sprite, I look at the string section as this giant group of soloists where you can pass something from like, first stand to second stand to third stand. They can do these cool effects. This really scares your sixth stand violinist, let me tell you. In Sirens, I went back to this group of soloists, and I took the two offstage violinists who in the Sprite movement eventually get the riff gets passed to them, and you kind of hear this riff being sawed away off backstage, and then it passes back towards the conductor. In this movement, the soloists in the wings, it's kind of this kind of poignant, almost eerie thing of them playing this very simple tune, and you don't see them. Gradually, each member of the string section starts to join in, and you get this kind of like web of string instruments playing this siren song. At the end of it, the kind of Zaraton, which is this giant island that's an animal, sort of consumes them in the way that you think of the sailors in Ulysses get dashed on the rocks. We're not going to get that far. This one is the longest excerpt, is about 2 minutes or so. Just wanted to show you a little bit of the lyrical side of this piece. This is when the piece starts to get extremely much longer. The movements become 6-7 minutes. So here we are, Sirens from Anthology of Fantastic Zoology. So there's some sirens for you. We had 2 sirens in this discussion. Seriously, ever since I stopped studying with John, I feel like I have just graduated to the next level. I mean, I always will call John with every piece and raise some questions to him. In this case, it was like, I really want this kind of Technicolor book of mythological creatures. And I've got these different ideas about spatialization, and John always encouraged me to first kind of create the finale, which I'm not going to play for today, because the first minute's 30 seconds, the last minute's 15 minutes. You have to check that out. It's Riccardo Muti, the Chicago Symphony, playing Entomology, Fantastic Zoology. But I wrote that movement, not first, but I kind of created these moments when all of the themes would be happening simultaneously. The piece kind of has a dusk till dawn trajectory. Starts with twilight, and then it goes to dusk, night, midnight. And then there's the final movement is called madrugada. That's a really cool word in Spanish that means the time after midnight before dawn. I thought that'd be the great kind of witching hour way to have all these creatures come together. And so, you can hear that, I've constantly have stuck with John's teaching, and, you don't have to agree with everything your teacher tells you to do, but absolutely, when you've got a great mentor, stay in touch with them and keep showing them the music, because that's how you continue to learn. So thanks for being a tough jerk, John, and kicking my ass in many, many ways.
And can I just say, I am incredibly proud of you, Nathan. I think you're doing enormous, fantastic work. I think anybody listening to the pieces can see, without even seeing the score, how phenomenally they're put together. You're a giant. Bravo.
Well, thanks. I know we're all missing real music, and it's cool to be put together with the ACO and Derek to do this. So
both of these pieces are so much about the grotesque and the fantastical and the animal, and I'm interested that you're both drawn to that. And one of the viewers said that they were remarking how John is Mason's teacher, yet you both have a distinctive voice, and was curious about how all composers evolve and create their own unique artistic self. And but I was, and so maybe that might be something interesting to consider and think about. And I wanted to ask both of you how that kind of grotesque and that fantastical, that animal aspect of music relates to today and to current events, and maybe even to what's going on now in the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I obviously Circus Maximus was about today. We are in a grotesque time. We're in a time that we never could imagine, not just with the last 4 years, but now with the worldwide epidemic. And we keep going, and we're going to get better. Everybody's going to get better. Just now we're on the right path, and we will do this. Mason's imagination goes to that the same way I do, partly because I think that's what is the most interesting thing to explore. I happen to love collecting what we call primitive art from all over the world, and my website has pictures of all the things I have, which actually Picasso and Braque and all those people collected and then painted their expensive pictures. But I have the originals. I have the original primitive art, and it's not primitive. It's extremely funny, sophisticated, and all that. But those extremes are what make music exciting. Mason's music is got tremendous variety in it, and that's what makes it exciting. I don't think, for me, everyday life conversation is acceptable in our world as it is in, say, the music theater. I really can't do that. I need something fantastical. And I think Mason is the same way. We need to feel that wonderful, otherworldly, primitive, raw, and very exciting place to be. I don't know about you, Mason. Am I speaking too soon?
No, I mean, I know what you're saying. I think for me, the notion of fantasy and the imagination is always so powerful, because eventually the fantasy and the imagination can become real. You know, one of the inspirations of this piece, of course, was the book by Borges. But you know, musically and theatrically, you know, there are these great fantasy writers like Tolkien. You know, I keep on my desk. I'm a geek, so get ready. This is like Thorin's Key. Yeah. You know, this is from a book, but you know, here and now, there's so many people, almost like a religion, that believe in Lord of the Rings. I love the idea, especially in those books, that the fantasy elements are woven into this kind of hyper-realistic description of the landscape, what's going on. And you know, in looking at the notion of surreal music and you know, kind of how do you create mythological creatures, the idea is to create something that's so vibrant and vivid and memorable, like a theme in Tchaikovsky, but that also has surreal elements to it. You know, we talk about that in art. You know, if you're going to paint a melting clock, you need to know how to paint a really good clock. In music, it's a little harder because it's a little more abstract. But I love that that challenge to create something that is both anchored in elements that we understand in reality. You know, like say a sprite, some kind of a capricious creature running around, and then also elements of the imagination, where it can just pop off stage and suddenly the music is invisible. So for me, fantasy has always been a powerful interest, even if it's not necessarily always heard in every single piece. In this particular piece, it received like a huge investment of my time.
And a good one.
Mason, what are you up to next? What's next for you?
Well, I'm in the middle of a piano concerto for Daniil Trifonov, who's just a stunning pianist and has just an unbelievable way of playing not only pyrotechnic fireworks, but very lyrical music. And I'm working on with Gene Shear an opera for the Met based on the amazing adventures of Cavalier and Clay. There's several other things that are going on as well, but those are the two things that have been kind of nursing me through this pandemic. I can at least go in my little hole and focus on some projects that I know will come to light. And of course, next year I've got a piece that is finished but is not yet recorded. It will be recorded in 2 weeks with the Chicago Symphony, Philharmonie Fantastique, the Making the Orchestra. It's an animated film that I made with Gary Rydstrom, who's a director out here in San Francisco, and animator Jim Capobianco. It's kind of like a journey inside the orchestra that was to be premiered last year, but of course, due to events, it had to be postponed. But we were actually going to Chicago, and under incredible complexity, we're recording the soundtrack to the film. So those are the things that are kind of on my mind right now. And I got to say, there's so many artists right now that are really hurting, performing artists with 2 artists and their families. As hard as it has been for me to not hear live music, and I'm thankful that I can go and compose as a composer. We got to really remember the people out there that are musicians that really don't have anything they can do. So I'm glad to be able to compose on those projects.
And well, that's great that you're working in with animation again after all these years, I guess. And John, of course, a lot of people know you. You have some fans who happen to be fans of your films as well as your concert music. And but you're also working on, well, you've done an opera. And
yeah, the opera's finished. Mark Adamo did the libretto, and it's going to open in Santa Fe. And since Santa Fe is an open theater by its nature, we actually are going to do it in July. They're going right ahead with plans to do it. And then I finished a saxophone concerto, which was supposed to be premiered in January, and of course is not, but it's a big 30-minute sax concerto. Have just finished composing for Annie Akiko Myers the cadenzas for the Beethoven concerto, violin concerto, which was complete delight for me. It's one time I really enjoyed composing because Beethoven is my hero, and I know that piece backwards. And oh, it was so nice to take those incredible musical ideas and work with them. So I'm just finishing that, and we'll see what's going to happen. I don't really want to take commissions now. I want to just sort of do what I want to do when I do it, you know. And so I don't know what I'm going to do next.
Oh, I mean,
This is
thank
so
you so
classic.
much.
This is so classic that you're saying that, John. Wait till the next masterpiece comes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you both so much for being, being with us, and also just being so, human and vulnerable with us about your process. And it's so inspiring to have you both, and to also learn a little bit about this kind of intergenerational connection, which we've been trying to highlight in these talks at ACO. So thank you, John. Thank you, Mason. Thank you to the ACO staff. Thank you to the ACO board, some of whom popped in here. I saw John's publisher, a couple of generations of his publishers. I saw, and thank you so much, Christina Jensen and Jensen Artists, for helping produce the series. Thank you to the Yale University Oral History of American Music, who are archiving these talks, so that any mistakes you both made are going to be there for the future.
Forever.
But I want the audience to know that they can view this talk for at least another week. We'll have it up through this link, and it'll be up on YouTube, I believe. And I just wanted to say that our next composer-to-composer talk is going to be Joan Tower with Connor Brown. And after that, we're going to be speaking. Yeah, I think the information is there on your screen. We're going to be speaking with Meredith Monk and Missy Mazzoli. So there's a bunch more of these composer-to-composer talks. And to find out more, just go to the ACO website, where we'll have information about that, and also about our professional development programs, which are going on simultaneously during this terrible pandemic period, which we all hope will soon be over. So thank you, Mason. Thank you, John, so much for sharing your music and your thoughts.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Lots of love to you both.
Bye-bye.
Bye.